Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I'm here, slightly belatedly, to do the mid-year book Freakout tag. I had planned to do it last week, but last weekend we ended up going to a wedding, which was really lovely, but it did cut my time for filming and editing a little bit short. However, June is still the halfway point of the year, so let's talk about what I have read, what I have loved, what I have not loved, and what I still need to read in the second half of the year. So the first question asked, what are some of the best books that you have read so far this year? And I actually had more than I thought I had when I went back and looked through all the books that I had rated 5 stars. And here are the ones that I've rated 5 stars so far. I loved The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross. This book left me with so many questions, so many thoughts, I'm still thinking about some of the thoughts that it brought up, and I read it over 2 months ago. It's very, very scary, but it's also so thought-provoking, which to me makes it so well done. I also had Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which I just devoured. The way that you get into these characters' heads and feel their grief, and yet that doesn't put you off. It just sucks you in and you completely see and hear and feel everything around them. I absolutely loved it. The Animals at Lockwood Manor by Jane Healey, again, was such an immersive experience, and it was dark, it was gothic, it didn't always go the way I thought it was going to go, which I found really good, because I feel like because gothic books have been around for a long time, you could kind of use your knowledge of gothic tropes to kind of figure out where something is going. This did not go where I thought it was going to go, which I found really refreshing. Hana Khan Carries On by Uzma Jalaluddin was both incredibly heartwarming and light, but at the same time dealt with some really deep questions of gentrification, of gender, of Islamophobia and racism, and the benefits but also the dangers of having a social media persona, and it was just wonderful. I truly loved it. And 2 books that I haven't yet talked about because they will show up in my June wrap-up, but I, like everyone else, adored The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philyaw. I found each of these short stories really immersive and gave you a full picture of the characters and the world, and that is really hard to do. It's really hard to do within such a short space of time anyway. And I truly loved this. And I also loved My Policeman by Bethan Roberts, which I finished yesterday. This was absolutely stunning, and I would highly encourage you all to read it before you see the film. And I know lots of people are planning on seeing it because the teaser trailer was just released a couple of days ago. And I think they're going to do a really good job with it, but I loved the way this book is told. And I don't think that's something that you're going to be able to replicate easily. This book is told from 2 perspectives. And so each quarter of the book, you change. What I found truly interesting is that you hear from Marion's perspective, you hear from Patrick's perspective, but you never hear from Tom himself, who is the policeman. You just hear from the 2 people on either side of him. And I found that a really interesting way of storytelling. And the writing itself is absolutely beautiful, even when the characters and their thoughts and actions really aren't. The writing is still beautiful. So I would highly encourage you to read it before seeing the film. Question number 2, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? And I'm discovering how few series I am reading these days. But I did think of one, which was Daughters of Night by Laura Shepard Robinson. Technically, this is a sequel to Blood and Sugar, which came out, I think, in 2019. In Blood and Sugar, you follow Captain Henry Corsham as he tries to solve the murder of one of his friends and his involvement with the slave trade and London's involvement with the slave trade in the late 18th century. And here we follow his wife, Caroline, as she tries to investigate the murder of a prostitute when the law is completely unwilling to do so itself. This was gripping, it was fascinating. Again, you didn't always like Caroline and the choices that she made, but if you've read Blood and Sugar, that gives you an insight into her relationship with Henry, which kind of explains some of the choices that she makes here. Question number 3, what are some new releases from this year that you haven't read yet? And I actually have a couple that I picked up recently. The first is Half Sick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian, which retells the story of Elaine, the Lady of Shalott. At least I think she's Elaine. But giving her more power and more agency. At least that's what I'm guessing by the cover. And I'm really excited about this. I also need to read Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This was nominated for the Women's Prize this year, and I've heard really wonderful things about it. I also really want to read The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont, which will show up again in a future question, so I'm not going to tell you too much about it right now, but I am going to put it to the side. And I also really want to read Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman. I picked this up at the beginning of the year, and I still haven't read it, so I really need to get around to this one. And in fact, I probably will next month, so stick around for my July TBR, and I'll tell you more about this one. Question number 4, what are some of your most anticipated releases for the second half of 2022? And to be honest, I don't have many because I am usually pretty terrible at knowing when new books are coming out. I usually tend to find out about them after they've already been released. But there are 2 that I could think of so far. The first is The Belle of Belgrave Square by Mimi Matthews. Have I read The Siren of Sussex yet? No. But does that stop me from probably going out and buying this book in October when it is released? Also no. Do I have a problem? Maybe. This is part of another historical romance series which looks really, really fun, and I just picked up the first book a month ago, so I'm hoping to read that soon, ideally before October when this sequel is slated to come out. I also really want to read Agatha Christie, An Elusive Woman, I think it's called. It's Lucy Worsley's biography of Agatha Christie. I believe that's coming out in August or September. So I really want to pick that up, and ideally I would love to read that and then read The Christie Affair, because this also speculates on what might have happened during those 11 days that Agatha Christie went missing, but this one does so from the perspective of her husband's mistress. So I feel like those 2 books would be really cool to read in parallel with one another. Question number 5, what was your biggest disappointment this year? And I would have to say my first disappointment was Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell, because I love everything that I've read so far by Elizabeth Gaskell, but this one was just not well done. It was a very slow start. I did not like any of the characters, such that I really didn't care what happened to them by the end. And I was also disappointed by the book Accomplished by Amanda Quain, and this attempts to retell Pride and Prejudice from Georgiana Darcy's perspective, while also setting it at a modern-day New England prep school. I really did not like this one. I did not like any of the characters. I didn't feel like it played with Pride and Prejudice that well. I didn't feel like the way that Amanda Quain handled describing the diverse cast was done well. I feel like the way she described race and what people looked like felt very clunky, even though I'm glad she did have a diverse cast of characters. It just made me very uncomfortable all around. Which is sad. I'm always excited when there's a new young adult Austen adaptation in the hopes that it will pull more young people into loving Austen the way I did, and still do. Question number 6 asks, what was your biggest surprise this year? And this is another book I finished quite recently, and that was His Right Hand by Mettie Ivy Harrison. I borrowed this from my library, and this is book number 2 in the Linda Walheim mystery series, which Mettie, who is a practicing Latter-day Saint, writes about a bishop's wife in Draper, Utah, in the LDS community. And I found this really surprising because I remembered reading book 1 years ago and really enjoying it. And I remembered that it probed a little bit at problems in the LDS community, but mainly it was just a mystery about missing people and this bishop's wife ending up solving the case purely by piecing together what she knows about the community that she lives in and serves. This one completely took me by surprise because it took that probing to the next level. And I think each subsequent book in the series is going to do that as well, in that it is probing really deep and really hard topics within the community. This time looking at what being gay in the LDS community is like and what being trans is like in the LDS community. I was surprised that it would go there, first of all, but I was also pleasantly surprised at how balanced a look it gave us, which did mean that at times we were looking at really transphobic and really homophobic points of view, which was really hard to read. But on the other hand, that there were also characters who could give a really balanced perspective and could be really positive and really accepting of it. And I think that both do exist within the LDS community. So I was really surprised at how well that was handled and how she is clearly pushing the LDS community to examine the way they handle these issues, but in a way that doesn't feel really dogmatic. And I really appreciated that. Question number 7 asks, do you have a favorite new author from this year? And yes, I think I have a couple actually. The first is definitely Deesha Philyaw, with the way that she really deftly crafted these stories. I am so intrigued to see what she writes next. I have also been binging and loving the League of Extraordinary Women series by Evie Dunmore. I really enjoy the way she writes these Victorian romance novels, and I can't wait for book 4, which I think is now coming out next year. And I also grew to love Natalie Haynes as a writer. I found her really lyrical and really powerful as a writer. And I know she has a few more Greek myth books out now, so I'm really intrigued to pick those up eventually and hope that I enjoy them just as much. Question number 8 asks, who is your new fictional crush? And I really don't have one from this year. I think I'm tending to stick with my old tried and true favorite crushes of Mr. Tilney and Mr. Knightley. Question number 9 asks, who is your newest favorite character? And again, I don't have one in particular, but I have been so privileged to meet so many incredible characters through all of these stories that I have been reading. Book number 10 asks, what book has made you cry this year? And again, there hasn't been one. I rarely cry at books. I rarely cry at films, honestly, but it's even rarer for me to cry at a book. So none has managed that so far this year, but that doesn't mean that they haven't created a huge sense of pathos as I've been reading them. Question number 11, what is a book that made you happy this year? And I'm coming back to Hannah Khan Carries On. Even though, yes, there are really, really hard sections to read in this book. Overall, it was so positive, and you could just feel the love within the community of characters that it can't help but warm your heart. Question 12 asks, what is the most beautiful book that you have been given or bought this year? And I have to say, Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman is gorgeous. Look at that, and the detail in the blue. It's really, really beautiful. But also, I just purchased this new edition of The Deep by Rivers Solomon. It's so striking, and the detail within each of the patterns and the stripes, it's just beautiful. And I do actually like this more than the original cover. And question number 13 asks, what do you still need to read by the end of the year? And my answer is so much. I'm in one of those moods at the moment. I don't know if you all ever feel like this, but I'm in one of those moods where I look at my TBR piles and I want to read everything all at once. Which is both good and bad. It pushes me to read more books, but it's also a physical impossibility. So I don't know what to do with that feeling sometimes. But there are some books that I absolutely want to read. I mean, I have to read The White Tiger by Aravinda Adiga in order to watch the film, and that will satisfy 2 goals for this year. I want to continue reading the Barsetshire series now that I have the next 3 books in the series that I haven't read yet. I want to read Vanity Fair before the summer is over so that then I can have a lovely historical television series to watch while school starts again. I am getting so excited for Jane Austen July and Victober this year, which stick around for my Jane Austen July TBR soon. There are too many wonderful books to read, to be honest. So I am going to go off and try and read some more of them. But if you have done this tag yourself, either link the video down below or let me know what some of your biggest answers to some of these questions were. If you have thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned or further questions about them, do let me know in the comments down below. Although don't tell me if you hated a book that I am really excited to read. Please save that until after I have read it too. And until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.